I've been following the presidential campaign, and the reason I have to do that is because I'm the American Empress, and the Jesuits are trying to install a president in office who will undermine my conspiracy law and undermine me as the Empress. And my conspiracy law is anti-Jesuit law. I just want to give you all some pointers. It is very important who we elect as the American president, because if the Jesuits put in one of their Jesuit patsies into office, which will be one of their puppets, they will be like an Adolf Hitler. Um, Jesuits have a very clever propaganda campaign going on right now. And using their about 95% control over the Western mainstream press, they are trying to choose the next president. You can pretty much tell who to vote for by who is being the most slandered in the news media. Right now, these are the candidates I endorse. If you're a Democrat, I would endorse Hillary Clinton. And the reason I say that is because my men have told me that Hillary supports my conspiracy law about 100%. And she's a big fan of my conspiracy law. And I'm going to have a link for my conspiracy law underneath this link. You may say, but are you a Democrat? No, I'm an independent, though I have a history of voting Republican. But I feel that Barack Obama has been a great president. And I have been very pleased with him. And for the most part, we had the real Barack Obama until about April 2012, when the Jesuits murdered him. And read my book, The African Congo. I think that's what I call it. It's about Barack Obama's head in a jar. If you go to my writer's site, you can read how he died. And what happened is after 2012, he was replaced with an automaton. It's kind of like an android. And so basically, it was the android who won re-election because the real Barack Obama was murdered. The automatons are very good, and it's hard to tell that they're an automaton unless you really know the person. Judge Terrence Jenkins said when he speaks with Barack Obama, he can tell it's the automaton. Now, the problem we've had with the automaton is the Jesuits are undermining a lot of his edicts. So you're hearing stuff on the news which is not the real Barack Obama's policies. Anything anti-Russian that you're hearing on the news is where he's being undermined, and where the Jesuits are able to insert their policies into his administration. And I do believe that he has a Jesuit clone who has been making some appearances, possibly. I'm not really sure, but my men tell me that Barack Obama has been a staunch supporter of my conspiracy law. He's trying to work around all of the Jesuit lies in the news media about him. Anybody who becomes president has to deal with a Jesuit-controlled Western press, which is a really big challenge. And Barack Obama died because he supported me. And his automaton has been pretty good. So I've been pleased with Barack Obama. And you can't believe most of the stuff you hear in the news about him. Basically, he has pretty much supported Vladimir Putin. And so when you hear stuff in the news saying that he hasn't, what you're probably hearing is the people that are undermining him and trying to make him appear to support policies which he does not. So the Jesuits are trying to reorchestrate a Cold War between Russia and the United States based on intelligence information from the 1950s and 1960s. Like all the stuff, all the bad stuff you hear about Vladimir Putin, it's all lies. Like starting with that Malaysian jetliner that crashed in the Ukraine. They say that a Russian knocked it down. The truth behind that, and I don't have time to go into it on this video because I'm dealing with political candidates, was that it was filled with Nukhaki and it was headed for Vladimir Putin. So apparently it got knocked down. He had to defend himself because they were trying to kill Vladimir Putin with that. I'm not even sure it even had people on it. I think they may have made that whole thing up, that it had passengers. I'm not sure. I haven't asked my men. but I have heard from my men that it was that it was filled with Nukaki headed for Vladimir Putin. Regarding Syria, Assad in Syria he is an anti-Jesuit leader. And Vladimir Putin has been trying to work with him to oust the Jesuits in ISIL out of his country. ISIS never would have happened if the American Jesuits didn't interfere with the Syrian government. So basically, some American military leaders who are Jesuit have been undermining Barack Obama, the automaton, and carrying out Jesuit policies in the Middle East. And they've been working out from underneath Barack Obama. In other words, they're not really, I don't believe that what's happening over there is what the real Barack Obama wants, but they're working out from underneath him. And that's why it's so important that whoever becomes president needs to be a strong, courageous leader, because you're going to be dealing with Jesuits who are going to be working out from underneath you, carrying out Jesuit policies and trying to make it appear that you did it, and trying to weasel around all the lies and the propaganda in the press. Is going to take a very smart man or woman. So I believe that Hillary Clinton is the one I would endorse as the Democratic nominee. I don't know much about Bernie Sanders, and I could change my mind, but I endorse right now Hillary Clinton as the Democratic nominee. On the Republican side, it's very possible we may end up with a Republican president. And if this happens, I endorse Donald Trump. He seems the best choice in the Republican field for me. And the reason I choose Trump is because he just made a statement, I think in the past 48 hours, where he said that he believes in having a big military backup, but he believes in letting Russia handle Syria, which I think is wise, because Vladimir Putin wants to work with Assad. And Assad, as I told you, is now anti-Jesuit. So Jesuits have created a complicated mess in Syria, and in the Western propaganda, they're trying to make it appear that that Vladimir is sponsoring terrorism in Syria, and that is not correct. Vladimir Putin is probably the most anti-terrorist president on the planet, because the Jesuits are behind about 99% of all Muslim terrorists in the world. You may say, what's wrong with Ben Carson? I'm kind of neutral about Ben Carson, but I'm not sure that he would have the smarts and the backbone needed to deal with Jesuits as a president. Or Donald Trump seems to have those qualities. Carly Fiorina has just said some out-and-out stupid things about Vladimir Putin, and I can't endorse her. She seems like if she got into office that she would end up becoming a Jesuit patsy. In other words, just being their puppet. I just don't think she doesn't seem to understand Vladimir Putin, and she's just parroting the typical Jesuit Western propaganda about him. And Marco Rubio, I think he just may be a Jesuit. I did a little bit of research on him, and he's Roman Catholic, but he also belongs to a Southern Baptist church. That's kind of suspicious right there. Jesuits are big infiltrators. And I'm not just basing it on his church membership. He has made some statements which indicate to me that he doesn't know how to think outside of the box. He can't be creative, that he's basically going to parrot the Jesuit line, Western conservative line. Jesuits have a conservative line. They have a Republican line and a Democratic line. The Republican line basically is Vladimir Putin, Syria, and Iran are all the big boogie bad guys, and we got to do everything we can to stop them. And they fail to realize that 99.9% of all Jesuit terrorists in the world today are Jesuits, and therefore to deal effectively with terrorism, you need to deal with Jesuits. And so what they do is they go in there under the guise of fighting terrorism. They go in and attack these nations without having done their homework, and they end up making a first-class mess of things, which is what George W. Bush did when he went into Iraq, which Vladimir and I felt he never should have done. We actually think because of that, ISIS was created. And that's what the Jesuits wanted. See, George W. Bush, when he was president, he was a Jesuit puppet. He was scared, and he was a little stupid, too. See, the Jesuits threatened to harm his wife, Laura Bush, if he wouldn't do what they wanted. So he did everything they wanted, including extorting Vladimir Putin under threat of war with Russia into acquiring Ludmila Putin as his wife. The truth is, Vladimir Putin married a woman named Larissa in 1983. The Jesuits murdered Larissa in 2000 with the same systemic yeast infection that I am infected with. And Jesus has me on Seroquel, which is the only cure for the yeast bacterium that I'm infected with. So they murdered his wife. Then Vladimir Putin fell in love with me right after the 9/11 attacks when I noticed him. And when I felt like I could, the Jesuits did 9/11 mostly because of Brent Spiner, because he was going to try to come out using the airlines, going to fly out to Florida. The same day that Brent was about to board an airline to come out to Florida to try to marry me is the day 9/11 happened. It's true. So obviously Brent changed his mind that day, decided not to fly. So anyways, so I endorsed Donald Trump because Donald says that he thinks he can be friends with Putin. Vladimir and I need an American president that we can work with who will not undermine our efforts to oust Jesuit terrorism around the globe. And it appears to me that the only Republican nominee who seems qualified to do that is Donald Trump. So I don't know who's going to be president, but because I'm the Empress, I have to take an interest in whoever becomes president to make sure they don't undermine me. So for those my next book is in progress, and I will be dealing with Jesus Christ as the main character. It's going to be my definitive biography, going into how Jesus went out of his way to ensure that a baby would be born with the genes of Catherine the Great and King David. And I am literally the reincarnation of those two historical figures. Another thing that is of interest that I would like to point out is if you want to hear an actual voice recording of Laurie McBride, who claims to be the wife of Brent Spiner, I encourage you to check out the link underneath this video. You can hear an actual voice recording of her. And if she's Brent Spiner's wife, then Brent Spiner has some problems when you listen to that video. Now, the Jesuits are claiming that this is not an actual recording, that these are the work of trolls. But all I have to say is, if it's the work of trolls, then why won't the real Laurie McBride stand up and let us hear her real voice? Is she scared to let us hear her? This is the only voice recording that you can find of Laurie McBride in the mainstream Jesuit internet. The reason Laurie McBride won't let people hear her voice is because that is an actual recording of her voice, of Laurie McBride clone number 3 and number 4 at the Quebec trial in 2011. I encourage you to listen to her and listen to this woman who claims to be the wife of Brent Spiner. All I can say is, if she's the wife of Brent Spiner, he's got some big problems. We've actually taped her killing people in the courtroom. We had to shoot her down because she was killing people with a fire torch. And then in this recording, you will also hear the actual voice of the real Brent Spiner when I asked him to come up to the stand to testify which woman it was that scared him, me or Laurie McBride. And when he said Laurie McBride, Laurie whacked him over the head with a dildo, which was a replica of Brent Spiner's penis, causing him to wail, so that when he said Laurie McBride, it came out like a wail. And then he ran away from her and went back to his seat in the courtroom. That's what happened. So I encourage you to listen to this recording. In the meanwhile, I endorse Donald Trump as the Republican. I'm really proud of Donald for what he said the other day. He said that he does believe in a big military, but he also is not going to be stupid with it and go into crazy wars that we don't need to go into, and that he's going to let Vladimir Putin handle Syria. I endorse Donald Trump. I was going to vote for, anyways.